There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from not being heard. So many women in midlife, they don't fall apart loudly. They go quietly. They numb out. They turn inward. Friends, today we're naming that loneliness and the cost of carrying it alone. So if this is you, if you're feeling lonely, whether it's in your marriage, maybe it's in a relationship with an adult child or a parent, or just an overarching feeling of not being heard, seen, or known, you are in the right place, friend, and you are not alone.
Welcome to Letting Go Loudly, the podcast you never knew you needed. We're your hosts, Leah Lanham and Heather Hetchler, two midlife women, two certified coaches, and two friends who finally got tired of living life by rules we never agreed to. Around here, quiet compliance is officially canceled. We're letting go loudly and taking you with us. Now, back to our show.
Leah, I think we can both agree that loneliness is a topic that comes up a lot, whether it's in conversation with girlfriends or with clients. And loneliness is going to look different for different women. And I'm just curious, how do you define it in this season of life? Like what do you think loneliness looks like for women our age?
Well, I feel like at our age, with our children leaving, there's a little bit of loneliness there because you had conversations. Maybe you have daughters that you're very close to or sons that you enjoy their conversation and that's gone. So it
Mhm.
leaves you a little bit lonely for their acknowledgement and their conversation, really. And I also think that sometimes you feel lonely even when you have a spouse, and because nothing's really changed as far as like maybe your career paths. You're still going in your directions of, working and this and that, but you're not, maybe you're not connected yet again after your children have left, or maybe you haven't made those turns to make yourself connected again with your spouse. And I just feel like sometimes loneliness can set in when somebody's going in one direction and the other person is maybe halted at the time. And I can give a great example of that. My husband works still. I left a job a couple years back to care for my dad who had taken a fall after my mom passed away. And my husband's going in one direction and here I am. I left my job. My father was recuperated and had moved back to his house and I was kind of lonely. I mean, I'll admit I was lonely. My dad was no longer at my house under my care. My children had moved out and were in college and doing their things. And my husband was still working. So I felt very much alone. And I had to make some big decisions. Do I go back to work? Do I want to start another career? Because I had left a job I worked at for 10 years and I loved that job, but I didn't think I wanted to go back to that because what if something happened to my dad? So I was alone and I feel like I had to choose at that point, okay, what do I need to do here? What do I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to feel like I'm in a house and my husband's working and I'm just here doing nothing. So I had to quickly decide what I wanted to do to get out of that loneliness. And I started doing some things that we can talk about all of these things
Mhm.
with both of us. But I started doing some things that to get involved with things that I loved and all the things that you think of when you have a job. Like, oh, if I didn't work, I would make a quilt, or I would, go and I'd clean my house from top to bottom, or I would, join this group or that group, or, I'd read books. I had to do that. I had to stop and think, all right, what are all those things I thought of? I'd sit at my desk at work. I worked 24, not 24/7, but 8 days a week. 5 days a week for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. And I would sit there sometimes and think, oh my gosh, if I was at home, I could be doing this, this, and this. So I did. I started getting involved in the community a little bit and doing some things, and it helped a lot. But it does take a while to get that loneliness that's upon you to start evaporating, if into thin air.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're sharing that. There's a couple things that stand out as I'm listening to you. One, like loneliness is upon me. I love the wording that you use, and we've talked about this before, but those feelings are upon you, they aren't you. And you talk about, I'll say, a physical loneliness of like being used to having people around you and then that going away. And I think a lot of women in midlife navigate that. But there's also, I think, an internal loneliness for a lot of women. I know a lot of women that I work with talk about feeling lonely in their marriage or lonely in their relationship with their adult kids. They don't feel heard. They don't feel seen. They don't feel wanted. And
Needed.
they feel,
Mhm.
the term I use with them is a little bit of this, not a little bit, but the notion of quiet quitting, that they feel alone and they feel like it's never going to get better. And so they just start to quietly quit in their marriage. They start to numb out, they start to drift apart, even in relationships with adult kids that maybe don't respond to their texts or invite them over. They start to quiet quit that relationship because it's too painful to fight to be seen, to fight to be heard, to fight to be known. And so this notion, this experience of loneliness, it's one that I think comes up in conversations when women in midlife are talking. It's a real thing. And I know we're going to do an episode next too on friendships, but that's another area where women have felt connected with other females and then a relationship disappears or a relationship goes away, a friendship. And that can be an extremely lonely experience for
Mhm.
someone who has been close to another woman, who knows all of her ins and outs, and then just fades away. And so if you're listening to this and you're feeling lonely, whether it's a physical loneliness of having people move out, or maybe your husband's traveling more, you have a different, or you're feeling lonely internally, like no one knows you, no one sees you, no one cares, no one checks on you. Those are all real feelings of loneliness, and they're feelings that have to be honored and grieved and made aware of, and we need to make a choice to move through them. And when you and I talk about moving through feelings, we're not saying stuff them down, dismiss them, pretend that they're not there. Moving through means I acknowledge they're there. I acknowledge this is hard, and I'm going to make some choices to do things differently. So my experience is differently. And so I wanted to ask you too, what do you think? We hear the word numbing out. I hear that a lot with women I work with, especially in difficult marriages. What does numbing out actually look like day to day? Like, how do you see that showing up for women?
I feel like sometimes it's easier just to ignore things, and I'm guilty of that. I will just if it's bothersome to me, I don't always just plow through, like you just said,
Hmm.
we getting through, moving through. I tend to be one of those people that stuff things down. And I feel like sometimes, exactly what you're saying, you do have to plow through. You have to look these things right in the face and figure out what you want to do about them. You need to either address the issue, you need to confront somebody maybe on a relationship level. But I think there's some certain things that we have to stop doing to get through that loneliness, And I'm a perfect example because I am not somebody who likes confrontation. I
Hmm.
don't like confrontation. So it's hard for me. I recently had something happen with a friend where I got a text and it was like out of the blue and it was not anything that I felt, but somebody was telling me why I was doing something and it was totally not how I felt. And I
Yeah.
didn't know how to confront and say, wow, what is this? I just kind of stuffed it down and we still haven't talked about it.
Well, and that's a hard one too when someone tells you what you're thinking or feeling. Like,
I was
you can
shocked.
tell someone how you're experiencing them, but to
Right.
tell someone you're this or you're that or you meant this, it does cause us to shut down. And I think that, if you're listening to, numbing out can look like busyness, like overcompensating, keeping busy so you don't have to think about things.
That's what I've been doing.
It can look like
Exactly.
scrolling, like being on your phone, like just keeping your brain busy so you don't have to deal with
Mhm.
what's there. And that's very normal.
Yeah,
And when we talk about this, we're not here to like shame I mean, we've all navigated this. This is something we're just bringing to the surface a lot of things that women are navigating.
right.
We overfunction And sometimes we just emotionally shut down and tell ourselves the lies like, yep, this person's never going to know me. This person's never going to care. This is never going to get better. I'm just going to be done with this relationship because it's not that it's not that we can't have the conversation. It's not that we can't address it. It's not that we can't move forward. We oftentimes want to avoid the feelings we have to process and sit with when we do the thing.
I think it's totally the avoidance of those feelings. I really do.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable. Like if you
It
have a
is.
conversation with this person, there's a chance they may say things that make you feel very uncomfortable. So you'd rather, just in general, as humans, avoid the conversation, avoid the feeling. It's
And
not
avoid the
about,
person
yes,
too.
because we don't want to feel
Right.
uncomfortable.
Yep.
But sometimes we have to move through that and say, even if the conversation is uncomfortable, even if the experience is uncomfortable, I'm safe, I'm okay. And the information is data. It's not the destiny of me. It's not who I am. It's
Exactly.
information. And
Right.
sometimes we're afraid of that information because we don't want to, nobody wants to feel crappy or yucky.
Right.
And so we stuff it down. And then
Yep.
when we stuff stuff down, it's down there. It's going to come out at some
Oh, yeah.
point. And sometimes it comes out when we're washing dishes or, like it does. It
It
just,
will come out.
it
That's
comes
for
out.
sure. It can create trauma at some point, if it's that big of an issue.
Yeah.
It could create a lot of trauma as
So
well, which
which it's real.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I want the women that are listening to take this to heart too, that the numbing out is rarely the problem. We think, oh, I've numbed out. I've numbed out. The numbing out is not the problem. It's the response. The numbing out is the response to how you're feeling. It's kind of a survivor mode.
Yeah.
And we put so much pressure, like I've numbed out. I'm not in this relationship or I'm not in this friendship. But that's our response. And we have to ask ourselves, why are we choosing to numb out instead of addressing? And we can address with truth and love. Like for many of us, I think that weren't taught conflict skills. Like, growing up, I wasn't taught conflict skills.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was taught to sweep it under the rug, put on a pretty shade of lipstick and pretend like life is perfect.
And I was taught ignore.
Yeah.
That was
And it's
my
those
mom
aren't,
and dad would
yeah,
ignore each other.
yeah,
They were fighting,
yeah,
they'd ignore each other for 3 days. Or my mom would ignore my dad. Just pretend like he wasn't even there, and that's stuffing it down.
yeah.
And this is what we would see is this kind of confrontation. And then a couple days later, everything would be fine again. So you don't know what happened behind the closed doors. We never learned what was actually
Yes.
happening.
You just saw the out,
We did. We knew it was okay afterward. Don't know what happened in between, but we would see ignoring and then, oh, everything's fine. So that was what we learned.
Yeah.
Nothing, basically. You ignore and then everything's fine.
and it's
Really.
not, but no,
It's
but you're
terrible,
right.
but
And
that's true. That's what we would
it is
see.
true. And this wasn't on, I think, when we had these shows, we have some talking points. This wasn't on our talking points, but I think that you bring up something super important is that, especially in marriage, we each come from a different home where we saw conflict handled or not handled.
Mhm.
And that is a part of the fabric of who we are, whether we cognitively see that. And so when two people aren't, when they're having a conversation, or whether it's with your spouse or even with a good friend, they grew up in a different home too. They have a different way of dealing. Some people go quiet. Some people push forward. They want, I have friends who grew up in very loud families where there were, like, when I would go to their house, like it looked like massight fights, which is not how our family was.
That's just how
So
they
I thought, like,
communicated.
oh my gosh, like, but then they would have pie afterwards and everybody was laughing and hugging. And it was like threw me for a loop. But
That
that's
is the answer.
pie is the answer. But that was their way. And where I was like, yeah, ours was like, stuffing it under. And so when I was in my mid 30s and I went through my first divorce, I really went and got a lot of counseling and learned that a lot of the conflict skills or lack of conflict skills I had were unhealthy. And so I really started on a journey to get healthy. And that's what got me into becoming a life coach and helping other women. But I realized that so much of what I experienced growing up, and it's not to throw shade on my parents, was not healthy conflict skills.
Right.
And it didn't, but realizing too that you are bringing that into a relationship, but so is the other person.
Mhm.
And so I became much more comfortable with addressing things, having hard conversations, sitting in uncomfortable places, being okay with people not liking me. And I realize not a lot of people are like that. And so you have to meet that person, whoever it is, whether it's your spouse, your good friend, a coworker, you have to meet them where they are and acknowledge that they're coming. So, like, if you're somebody who likes to lean in and have hard conversations and you're married to someone who shrinks, that shrinking and walking away can feel like abandonment because
Mhm.
you want to sit and talk. But that person who is walking away, maybe I love you so much I don't want to say something I'll regret, so I'm not going to say anything. Or I saw my parents shut down, walk away, and then they were okay in a couple days. That's what I want. I don't want to talk about this. And so when you bring two different styles together, it can feel very combative and lonely
Right.
because you're wanting from the other person what you give or what you need. And they're wanting from you what they give and they need. And sometimes just being able to sit down and understanding that you're just two people who are coming from different places can be very opening up and can start to dismantle the loneliness because now you understand better why they respond the way they do. It's not an attack on you
Right.
typically. It's their
Right.
survival. It's just like your survival.
Right. And they may never, you may never come to a full um y- agreement on that, but
Yes.
at least acknowledging it is the first step, I
Yes.
would think.
Being self-aware. I think when
Exactly.
you think about the emotional intelligence skills that I always say self-awareness is the number one emotional intelligence skill you can have because you can't change if you're not aware of your part. You can't
Right.
change. You have to be aware. You can have the best intentions, but you have to be aware of how your words and actions are falling on other people. And sometimes when we mean well, we don't want to go to that place where you mean I could have offended my friend or I
Right.
could have hurt someone's feeling. I'm trying hard
Oh
here.
yeah.
So being self-aware and even asking someone afterwards, like, how did that conversation go for you? Or how could I do something different? Or what do you need from me? And leading with those questions can open up communication, and that communication can help dismantle the loneliness.
I agree. And I know that sometimes we think about our kids, our
Mhm,
teenagers, young adults, but sometimes they're good to listen to about things like that, about self-awareness,
mhm.
because they will be honest with you about,
Yes. Oh,
mom,
yes.
you stuff down.
Yes.
You do this. You don't confront things. And I hear that a lot from my daughters. Like they say as they become adults.
Yes.
And that's always been my coping mechanism is just to breathe through it, release my trauma because I'm able to do that
Yeah.
and move on. And that's just how I've always been.
Mhm.
But they see that as just not a good, not good.
Yes.
They're like, you need to do things differently, mom. You can't just accept and move on. And I, that's a self-awareness for me
Yeah.
that I do that. I was like, I never even realized that's just part of me. It's so inherent that
Yeah,
I
because it's
just
part
do
of the
that.
fabric of you. But
Right.
I love the fact that your daughters feel safe to tell you that because a lot of women, whether they're 21 or 61, struggle letting their parents know because their parents have maybe dismissed them or shut them down. So the fact that your daughters can share that with you means you have a really healthy relationship with them. I think that that's
I
really
think they
good.
have a very healthy relationship with
With themselves,
themselves.
yes, and
I
that's the
do.
different and we're
Yes.
breaking generational patterns, and
Yeah.
when we talk about that, we're not putting our parents down. I do believe that generally, people do the best with what they have, and our moms didn't have an emotional toolbox to play from. I think our parents
They
did
didn't
have to stuff stuff down. They were dealing with so much more physical pain and suffering.
from their own parents
Yes, from their
because
parents
that
and
was
just
an era
navigate.
where
Oh, yeah,
you
you didn't
didn't
talk.
talk about anything.
No, you
It
didn't.
was like Mrs. Cleaver, right?
Yes, everything yeah, you just wore a dress to clean the house. I remember watching that, like, "Why doesn't my mom dress up? She doesn't look all fancy when she vacuums.
She has such
I
a
want
nice
that
meal.
life." Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think that you're right, and my daughters even, because I have to really be careful to wear the mom hat and the coach hat separately, and my kids have gotten good, like, "Mom, we know you mean well. I need you just to be my mom. No coaching,
Right.
no coaching. Stop the coaching."
Right.
And I'm like, "Okay." Because if I want to maintain that relationship, I need to listen to their feedback. Sometimes I have to bite my tongue and think, but this next nugget I had for you was going to be
Right.
so good.
Right.
but you know what? They can't receive it. And if the goal is for them to hear me, I have to speak in a way that they can hear me, and they might be overwhelmed. I can talk about, I mean, I coach, right? So I can talk for hours a day about problems, and then I'm okay.
Right.
Other people can't handle more than 15 minutes of
Right.
heavy emotion without just completely being drained.
Yeah.
And we can't make other people have our bandwidth, our emotional
Right.
bandwidth. So meeting people where they are is super, super important. Um, I wanted to ask too, so, we're talking about women and women feeling lonely. And what do you think kind of makes a woman stop using her voice when she gets to that place where she is quiet quitting and she's just like, you know what, it's easier just to be done. I'm going to be done.
Well, like we talked about, not being heard,
Mhm.
um, past conflicts, um, like emotional fatigue.
Yep.
Like I think some of these things are just, you almost come in a pattern with someone and you feel like, oh, they don't care about how I feel. You just get
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
they don't
You
care.
tell
Why
yourself
should I
that. Yeah.
even, why
Yeah.
should
Why
I
should I
even go through the
bother?
trouble?
Yep. Why should
Yep.
I bother?
Why should I bother? I'm just gonna shut up and go about my business. And that alone doesn't open any doors to fixing things.
No.
Because even if you were to approach it again, you might have a better response. And if
Hmm.
you learn self-awareness a little bit, like you
Hmm.
said, there's it still opens doors to different conversations.
Yeah.
So I think you should go move ahead. Try to do it each time, even if you're feeling like, oh, they'll never listen. Move ahead.
Yeah.
Try it. Try it. Try and try again.
And
Right?
try different things. I think that usually when a
Methods.
woman gets to a point where she is shutting down, it's taken a lot. She has
Right.
been through a lot. And I'll kind of, talk about it in the context of marriage, because that's where I see it a lot with my clients is women that are like, Heather, I'm done trying to prove myself to my husband. He sees it this way, or I'm tired of sharing my heart and having him go into problem solving mode. I'm tired of, wanting to just be heard and feel like he's telling me, you're too much or you're being too emotional. And I'm sick of hearing that. So I'm just checking out. I
Right.
can't do it anymore. And I think it takes a lot for a woman to get to that point, but I think a lot of women get there. And I think that, thinking about how you have been talking. So sometimes I see women, they over explain themselves, or they keep trying to give examples or reasons to their husband. See, if he sees it this way, if he hears it this way, then he'll get it. He'll get me. And they're desperate to connect with him, but what's happening with this over explaining is they're feeling more and more and more alone because he's not getting it. Because typically his response is more about him than her.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean he doesn't care about her, but for some husbands, it is very hard to see their wife suffer. And so subconsciously, sometimes they don't want to hear it, or they want to problem solve, or they want to fix it because they don't want their wife in pain. But how the wife takes it is he doesn't care. He's trying to shut me down. And so
Right.
both people mean really well, but they're experiencing it completely differently. And so if you're a woman and you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, that's me. I'm exhausted chasing, I'm exhausted explaining, then that method is not working. And so even though you're desiring a closer connection, sometimes the best way is to just slow down and to have a response. One of the responses that I share with women I work with and that I use in difficult conversations with people is just, I hear you. I hear you. It's an acknowledgement that you just physically heard the person. You're not agreeing, you're not defending, you're not engaging.
Right.
And it shuts the kind of the conversation down in a way like, I hear you, I hear you. And if they ask, well, do you agree with me? You could say, are you asking? And like, actually, I don't, but I hear you and I'm not going to interfere. Or I hear you, I don't support that decision, but I hear you. And then you can take some time, because sometimes what happens is the emotional atmosphere gets really heated when you feel like you're over explaining. You're trying to get them to hear your point of view and it's just not going anywhere. But trying to take some different avenues, like think about what's working and what's not. And sometimes that does mean working with a coach. Sometimes that does mean working with a counselor. And I think it's important to note too that life coaching is not life coaches are, a good life coach is certified, and we're not here to diagnose you. We're not here to take you through
Right.
family trauma. That's not our gifting. We're here to walk you through what's going on in your life. Where are you today? Where do you want to go? What are you doing now to respond to the pain? And then let's create a roadmap to get you to the place you want to be. And a good life coach, you're not going to work with them more than a few months. Like
Right.
it's more tangible, it's hearing. And so thinking about where you are, what has gotten you to this place where you're quiet quitting, what has gotten you to this place where you're numbing out, and then figuring out different responses in different ways so that you can move through it, like you're talking about.
And supporting you along the way. We
Absolutely.
definitely are here to tell you you're not alone.
Mhm.
There's plenty of women out there, including myself, that need this kind of coaching and need to hear that I'm doing okay and that this is a process I need to take to get to a better place.
Yes. I think a lot of women, regardless of when, go through seasons of feeling unheard or feeling, lonely.
Hmm.
And it's normal,
Yep.
but it's not a place we want to stay in. And I
No.
think we talked about that today is choosing to move through it, not stuffing it down, acknowledging where you are and, working through it so
Right.
that you can get to the other side of it.
Right. Right. And I think some of the things that maybe may pull you out of a lonely state could be, if you find yourself lonely and not connected. And I think we nobody wants to be unconnected.
No, not at all.
Nobody wants
No,
to be alone.
no.
We don't strive to be there. But I think there's things that we can do, like getting involved with like-minded people,
Hmm.
joining groups. My mom now would say that she was never a joiner. She didn't like to join. However, she loved to go shopping with a girlfriend that she had. They would go thrift shopping, they would do all kinds of things together. So she had a connection there. But I think finding like-minded people, whether you like to quilt, whether you like to golf, whether you like to do certain things, and really kind of digging deep on what you really do enjoy and finding like-minded people. You
Hmm.
might find a friend, a new friend, somebody in there that you can confide in and that will take some of that loneliness away.
Yeah,
But I still
absolutely.
think we need to address it. We
Absolutely.
need
You
to
do
say,
need
I'm
to
lonely and I
grieve.
need
Yeah.
to, what do I need to do? I'm
Yeah.
lonely.
You need to honor that.
You
And I
do.
think sometimes loneliness comes from a grief of things not being the way you want them, whether
Mhm.
it's in a relationship or like if your kids move out, like something that's going on, there's a change. And I think we need to allow ourselves to honor and grieve it, but not stay stuck in it.
Right.
And, there's something too. I see where people are like, well, you should just be grateful. And I've had this said to me, especially like when I was going through my cancer journey, I felt very alone because nobody else was going through it, right? So like I had the support of my husband, I had support of friends, but there's something about the mental toll cancer takes on you that you just feel alone. And no matter how much support you have, it can just feel like a lonely journey. And I had to get to a point where, like, that is the nature of this beast. That is the nature of what
You're
it
right.
is. And I'm going to, yes. And people are like, well, you should be grateful it's this or this or this. And I wanted to shove that down their throat because I'm like, I am grateful and it's hard.
Right.
And so,
And it can be.
yes. And so people throw that gratitude on people, like when so that I think it's one of the worst things that can happen is a woman is brave enough to open up to another woman or her spouse or whoever and says, I'm feeling lonely or I'm feeling this. And then the response is, well, you have all these great things in your life. You should be grateful. You should be grateful. It doesn't mean that woman isn't grateful. There's that duality. She can be grateful and also feel lonely or feel hard. And you have to, you work through it. But one thing I do suggest, and something I practice is I call it being a blessing detective. And I started doing this when I was early on as a stepmom too, because sometimes you could see all the crazy dynamics in your blended family and you could be like, oh gosh, there's so much going on.
Right.
And I would be intentional to, like, I remember we were on vacation once with all the kids and they all wanted, 6 kids, they all wanted to do different things. And so we're like, we can't do, 6 different things. And I remember, my daughter, they were in the ocean and I saw my stepdaughter go and grab her hand and walk her out because she saw that she was getting like salt water in. And I'm like, it just made me cry. And my husband's like, what are you crying about? I'm like, just the tenderness of seeing my stepdaughter walk over, take my daughter's hand, walk her out of the water. Like
The
they
care.
do care about each other. And even like the being a blessing detective doesn't mean you don't have pain in your life, but you look for the good. And like I think I wrote
It's
about
like
it
a
was
seeker.
yes,
You're
you're seeking
seeking
it
for the
out.
good.
You're still, dealing with the hard parts, the dynamics of, your stepkids missing their biological mom or things that are going on, but you're also taking moments to enjoy the beauty. And
Mhm.
I was reminded of that. I just went for like a routine checkup with my oncologist, and I don't like going to those because it's one of those things where you go in and you know why everybody's there. Nobody chose cancer. Nobody talks to each other. It's just this very heavy place.
Mhm.
And the nurse and I, like, we laughed together. And I thought, you know what? God is so good. Like he puts he puts helpers in your way on those hard days, but you can easily not see it. So like, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna like replay our conversation in my head. Like, this woman is my nurse. She didn't have to talk to me, and we laughed. She commented on my earrings. I told her I got them at this Creative Women's in Fort Wayne. And I'm like, I have to wear light earrings now because I wore heavy hoops for a long time and now they're sagging. And she's like, well, I got a lot of things sagging on me. And we just laughed about
Right.
midlife. Like our earlobes are sagging, other parts of our bodies are sagging, and that
Finding that
moment of
commonality.
laughter and
Yeah.
all of it,
Yep.
that's what I'm taking away from that day
Right.
is that. And that made me feel connected
Mhm.
in in a season of my life or a part of my life, because I'm 8 years out, but whenever I have to go back for cancer care, just routine stuff, that it takes me right back to that mental space, which is not a fun place to be. And so being a blessing detective, looking for the good and seeing it's all around us, and it doesn't erase the hard, but it helps us balance.
Mhm.
Helps us balance.
Yep. And I really think God puts those things in our life.
Yes.
Like you can pray for outcomes, but the way that they appear to you may not be what you
Yes.
were seeking. So I love that
Yeah.
because what you just said is kind of like,
Yeah.
you weren't looking for, you were praying to God that everything would go good that day,
Yeah.
but that little thing happened, and that really is God's way of saying, here you are.
Yeah.
You're good. This is
Yeah,
good,
it was very good because what I did, I walked in, my husband came with me, went to the meeting room, sitting there in that waiting room, and I'm tearing. He's like, "Are you okay? What happened?" And I'm a deeply empathetic person, but I just looked around to a packed waiting room. I know what all those people, okay, I don't know all of their past, but I know why they're
why they're
there.
there. Yep.
And it overwhelmed me to a point where I was crying
Yeah.
and I felt them very deeply. And so having that was, and the fact that I was aware to take that in. And I think you're right. We gotta bring our episode to a close here, but we sometimes have an idea of how our marriage should look, how our relationship with our adult kids should look, how the relationship with our parents should
Yeah.
look. And sometimes we hold on so tightly to that image that we don't enjoy the stuff that is there, the good stuff. And so I think letting go loudly also means letting go of our grip on how things should be, managing the hard parts of what is, but also allowing ourselves to enjoy the beauty that is there, the
And
beauty
they
that is
might be
there.
little things.
Mhm.
They might be just
Yeah.
showing up in little places.
So we
You
want to
just have
encourage
to,
the women listening to
yeah.
today to put on that blessing detective hat and look for those good things. And so if you've been growing quieter or smaller or more withdrawn, there is nothing wrong with you. Your voice didn't just disappear, but it's waiting for safety. And sometimes it's the safety that we have to give ourselves.
And there you have it. Another episode of Letting Go Loudly is in the books. I hope you're walking away feeling heard, encouraged, and more empowered to live out your version of letting go loudly.
Remember, life can be hard and beautiful at the same time. So choose what you're ready to release and make room for the good that is already here. If this episode resonated with you, we would love it if you would subscribe, like, and share with a friend and leave a review. It really does help us grow. Oh, and you can find us on Instagram at Letting Go Loudly, where you can connect with other women who are letting go loudly and message us with any topics that you would like to cover. We love and appreciate your feedback. We really do. And so until next time, this is Heather and Leah signing off and letting go loudly with you.
Goodbye.
Bye.